The wind howled like a wounded animal. It screamed through Painted River Valley, hurling rain sideways against the windows of Naomi Blackbird's cabin. The shutters groaned. The old cedar door shivered in its frame. Inside, the fire burned low, half alive, half fading, much like her. She stood barefoot on the rough wooden floor, arms wrapped tight around herself, her eyes locked on the crackling hearth. Her long dark braid was damp with sweat and humidity. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills like the drums of a war party long forgotten. Then came the knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. 1, 2, 3. Louder this time. That wasn't the wind. It wasn't a tree branch. It was a hand. She reached for the iron poker by the fireplace, her fingers shaking. No one came up here, not this far into the pines, and never during a storm like this, unless they were desperate or dangerous. She stepped toward the door, her pulse beating in her throat like a war drum. The latch clicked. The door opened 2 inches, and there he stood. Rain slicked down his bare chest, muscles carved like stone under skin the color of red earth. Long black hair clung to his face, his eyes as black as night, unreadable, unflinching. A quiver of arrows was strapped across his back. A longbow was in his hand. "Shelter," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel soaked in whiskey. For a second, Naomi didn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door shut. But something else, something ancient and wordless, pulled her forward. She stepped aside. He entered without a word. The firelight flickered against the walls as he dropped his bow with care. He unstrapped a blade from his waist and laid it near the hearth. He moved with the silence of a shadow in the presence of a storm. Naomi watched, gripping her arms to keep herself from trembling. It wasn't from fear. It was from something far more dangerous. He didn't ask her name. He didn't offer his. He simply sat on the floor near the fire, his back straight, his hands resting on his knees like a man who was used to waiting. Minutes passed, then an hour. The rain kept pounding the cabin roof. Lightning flashed across the windows, illuminating his face in sharp, strange beauty. Finally, she spoke. "Where are you headed?" He didn't look up. "Nowhere." A pause. Not anymore. Naomi's heart kicked. She swallowed hard and sat down across from him, putting the fire between them. "People don't just stop here," she said. "There's nothing up this trail but trees and ghosts." He looked at her then, his eyes steady. "I've walked with both." The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was heavy, real, a silence that pulled everything else into it. She didn't ask what he was running from. She didn't ask what he had lost. She knew that kind of silence too well to prod it. The night stretched on. The storm showed no sign of mercy. At some point, Naomi added another log to the fire and poured him tea. Pine needles, juniper, and sage, the way her mother used to make it. He drank it slowly with both hands as though it meant something. And then something shifted. It was the way he looked at her. Not like a man looks at a woman, but like a traveler sees shelter for the first time in years. Like something in her presence reminded him of being alive. She felt it too. The first touch wasn't a kiss. It was his hand brushing against hers as he set the cup down. It was heat, raw, unspoken, old as the land itself. And in the next breath, it was unstoppable. His mouth found hers like it had known the way all along. Their bodies moved like thunder and fire, primal and tangled, breaking and becoming all at the same time. Outside, the storm howled louder. Inside, they found something wordless and burning. By the time dawn whispered through the cracks in the shutters, Naomi lay still, curled in a blanket. Her skin was still humming, her mind lost somewhere between disbelief and yearning. She reached across the cot. It was empty. Her hand met cold wood. He was gone, like the storm, like a dream too real to be trusted. No tracks, no voice, no sign. Only the lingering scent of smoke and pine, and the press of memory in her skin. Naomi walked barefoot to the porch. The sky was gold-washed and clean, the forest glistening with fresh rain. The river down below rushed louder than usual, swollen from the storm. Birds called to each other like nothing had happened, but she knew something had. she whispered to the wind. No one comes here by accident. Not in a storm like that. She didn't know then that she had been changed, that deep within her, a seed had already taken root, a seed that would grow silent and unseen until the day it could no longer hide. She didn't know that this was not the end of something brief. It was the beginning of everything. The mornings changed first. Naomi woke with a sharp twist in her stomach, a sickness that rose from deep inside her belly, curled in her throat, then disappeared as quickly as it came. She tried to ignore it. Life in Painted River Valley didn't slow down just because your body turned traitor. There was bread to bake, herbs to dry, a roof to patch. But her hands were slower now, her breath shorter. The fire in her spine, the one that had carried her through 3 winters alone, felt dulled. It wasn't until she missed the second moon cycle that she let the truth settle. Not like a sudden shock, but like snowfall, quiet and undeniable. She sat on the porch one evening, watching the last blue light drip behind the ridge, and placed a hand over her belly. Still flat, still silent, but no longer empty. She whispered it to the wind, afraid to hear it out loud. I'm carrying his child. The storm had passed through her body and left life in its wake. May Holloway showed up with her usual basket of gossip and pickled onions, pushing the door open without waiting. Naomi had just finished stitching a tiny unfinished shirt. May's sharp gray eyes didn't miss it. That dress don't hide much, honey, she said, her voice softer than usual. I know a woman's shape when it starts shifting. Naomi stiffened, her needle slipping. You have something to say, May? May sighed. Just be careful. This valley has long memories. Folks notice things. Naomi met her gaze. Let them. When the first real kick came, Naomi dropped the needle she was threading and gasped. A soft, strange flutter low in her belly, like wings against the inside of her skin. She pressed her hand there, laughing and crying at the same time. Ashki, she said aloud, my little one. The name came out of nowhere, but it felt right. She spoke to him from then on. She told him about the river, about the smell of cedar, about the way snow fell in silence. She didn't talk about his father, not yet, but she promised Ashki he was loved. One day while gathering firewood, Naomi found something caught in the brambles. A black feather, long and sleek, not from any bird native to this side of the valley. A memory surged. Rain on skin, smoke in his hair, the way his hands had trembled only once, just before they touched. She didn't see anyone. Not that day, not the next. But she began to feel it. A pressure in the trees, a presence in the wind. She told herself she was imagining things, that the forest always whispered, that solitude played tricks. But deep inside, something else stirred. He was out there, and somehow, he knew. The boy was fast on his feet, too fast for a 3-year-old. Naomi often joked that Ashki didn't walk. He ran and skipped and crashed. Every rock was a mountain, every stick a sword. But when he stood still, it was unsettling, like now. He was crouched in the tall grass at the edge of the river, staring at the tree line with a strange, quiet intensity. Baby, she called gently. What do you see? Ashki didn't answer. He just lifted a small hand and pointed. Naomi squinted. Nothing moved. Only trees, mist, the flutter of a jay's wing. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Ashki turned to her. Mama, someone was there. Behind the big tree. They looked like a statue. Naomi's chest tightened. A statue? He nodded. But alive, like they were waiting. She looked again. Still nothing, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They watch you. The first feather appeared the next morning. It was caught in the side fence, black and clean, slicked with dew. It was placed, not dropped. Her breath caught as she plucked it free. Taryn. There was no other explanation. He was near. He was watching. Ashki knew it too, even if he didn't understand. Mama, why don't we go to town no more? He asked one afternoon. Just being careful, Naomi said. Of who? The boy looked up at her, his eyes like polished onyx, too sharp for his age. Is it the man you saw in the trees? She blinked. What makes you think I saw someone? Because you talk in your sleep, he said simply. You said his name. Naomi's hands froze. Taryn. Ashki nodded. You said it soft, like you missed him. Ashki found the second sign. They were walking along the south trail when he stopped and pointed to the mud. Look. Naomi knelt beside him. A single footprint. Bare, deep, larger than any settler's. A warrior's step. Fresh. Naomi's heartbeat stumbled. Ashki whispered, Is he following us? No, she said. I think he's leading. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat at the table, staring at the feather, the memory of the track. Her hands folded around a scrap of leather she hadn't touched in years, cut from the wristband he'd left behind that night. She walked out onto the porch. The moon hung low, gold and swollen. She could feel it again, that sensation of being watched, but it no longer scared her. It settled her. Taryn, she whispered into the dark, if you're out there, why are you waiting? There was no answer, just the sound of the painted river, never stopping, always carving its way forward. Across the valley, deep in the brush, Taryn watched from the ridge. He had come a dozen nights before. He had watched the child throw stones in the creek. He had watched Naomi gather roots with that same calm patience. He didn't know if she hated him. He didn't know for sure if the boy was his. But he felt the pull like a string tied from his ribs to hers, tight, frayed, and burning. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and wet dirt. It was time. Time to stop being a ghost. Time to come down from the ridge. The wind shifted just after noon. It carried a dry tension with it, the kind that made Naomi stop mid-stitch and glance toward the hills. The air no longer smelled of river and pine. It smelled of horse sweat, dust, and decision. Ashki was playing by the creek, his laughter rising like birdsong. Naomi wanted to keep it that way, just one more breath, but something inside her spine tightened. She stood and walked to the edge of her garden, scanning the ridgeline, and then she saw him, a shape on horseback, coming down slow, deliberate, a dark figure cutting through the valley like a memory reborn. Taryn. She didn't need to see his face. She felt it in her chest, in the sudden rush of heat to her throat, in the way her legs locked and refused to run. Ashki dropped a stone. Mama, who's that? Naomi couldn't answer. Taryn guided his paint horse down the path. His hair was longer, tied with leather and a single black feather. His bare chest gleamed in the sun, scarred and tattooed. When he reached the clearing, he stopped. He didn't dismount. He just looked at her, and years dissolved in that glance. Ashki took a step closer, tugging at her dress. Naomi finally found her voice. Go inside, she said softly. The boy didn't move. Who is he? Taryn dismounted, moving slow, like someone stepping onto sacred ground. When he stopped a few paces away, Naomi saw the shadows under his eyes, the new weight in his posture. This wasn't the same man who'd stood in her doorway soaked in rain. This was someone who had walked through fire. Taryn, she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded once. Why now? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the boy first. Ashki stared back, his dark eyes wide. Then Taryn finally spoke. His voice was low, rough, and real. I never left you, he said. I carried you every mile. Naomi's heart stuttered. The boy stepped forward. Naomi didn't stop him. Ashki tilted his head. Are you a warrior? Taryn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I was. Ashki looked him over. You look like the statue I saw in the trees. Naomi's breath caught. Taryn knelt slowly, lowering himself to the boy's level. His eyes softened as they studied Ashki's face. I know you, he said gently. Ashki blinked. But I don't know you. You will, Taryn promised. The boy reached out and placed a small hand on Taryn's shoulder. Naomi couldn't breathe. Everything in her screamed to run, to shield, to protect. But she didn't move. Ashki turned back to her. Mama, is he my... She cut him off softly. Let's go inside. Later they sat at the hearth, the same one where the storm had once painted shadows on their skin. Ashki was asleep upstairs. You left, she said. No anger, just truth. He nodded. I had to. For 3 years there were battles, not just with men, with duty, with myself. She studied him. You knew about him? Not at first, but I felt it. I heard stories. A woman by the river, a child with eyes like night. I came when I could. You could have come sooner. I was afraid, he admitted. Naomi's throat tightened. Of what? That you wouldn't forgive me. That he'd hate me. That you'd be better off without me. She stared into the cold hearth. You may be right. He said nothing. She finally met his eyes. But you're here now. Taryn leaned forward. And I want to stay. Naomi felt something shift in her chest, a wall cracking after years of holding tight. I don't know what that looks like, she whispered. We can find out. She looked away, blinking fast. I raised him alone. I buried my parents. I patched roofs, shot wolves. I held this land by myself. I know, he said quietly. I don't need saving. I didn't come to save you, he replied. I came to stand beside you. She closed her eyes. The wind picked up, brushing against the cabin like a breath. Taryn reached across the table and gently, hesitantly, placed a hand over hers. I'm not asking to erase the past, he said, just to be part of what comes next. Naomi opened her eyes and looked at their hands. She didn't pull away. Later that night, as she watched Ashki sleep, she saw something softer in the boy's face, a piece he hadn't known was missing clicking into place. This wasn't just about her anymore. Taryn stood in the doorway, silent. Naomi turned to him. Tomorrow, she said, you tell him everything. Taryn nodded. I will. She studied him one last time, then stepped away from the bed, letting him take her place beside the child. Ashki shifted in his sleep, one small hand flopping onto Taryn's knee. The warrior flinched, then went still, letting the child touch him without pulling away. Naomi watched from the shadows. Whatever came next wouldn't be easy, but it was beginning, and she wouldn't walk it alone. The peace never lasted long in a place like this. Down in town, Elias Crow had started asking questions. And when Elias Crow asked questions, it wasn't just curiosity, it was strategy. He owned half the valley and smiled like a man who knew where all the unmarked graves were. That land belongs to Naomi Blackbird, May Holloway told him. Does it now? Elias drawled. Seems a shame for such a prime stretch to go to waste on one woman and a shack. May lifted her chin. A woman who's worked harder than most men I've seen. Elias chuckled. She's got help now, doesn't she? Word is she's harboring a savage in her house, an Apache warrior. He leaned forward. You know what happens when outsiders start nesting? Makes folks nervous. Makes me nervous. May stared him down. You'd better learn to live with nervous, Elias. That land ain't yours to want. Elias stood, slow and deliberate. Not yet. Naomi felt the threat before May ever brought the warning. A tightness behind her eyes, a stillness in the birdsong. He wants your land, May told her, and he don't care how he gets it. Naomi's jaw clenched. He can't take what's mine. May leaned in. He won't do it legal. He'll send men in the night. And he knows about the boy. Naomi blinked. Ashki? May nodded. Word is he's got Apache eyes. That's how they talk, like his blood makes your claim less worthy. Naomi stepped back, her chest burning. That boy has more right to this land than any man in that town. Maybe, May said, but they won't see it that way. You've been peaceful too long. That night, Naomi sat with Taryn under the stars. He'll come, she said. Taryn nodded. Yes. Do we run? He turned to her, his eyes steady. No. We make this ground harder to steal. She reached for his hand. We can't lose this place. You won't, he said. Not while I breathe. They'll call you a threat, she said. I am. His answer didn't shake her. It steadied her. The next day they began to prepare. Taryn rode the perimeter, mapping sight lines and choke points. Naomi reinforced the shutters. They built a small storage pit beneath the floorboards. Food, water, extra arrows. Ashki sensed the change. Are we in trouble? He asked. Naomi crouched beside him. Not yet, but we're getting ready, like when winter comes. The boy nodded, then offered her a small wooden bear he'd carved. He's brave. He'll guard the house. She smiled and tucked it in her coat pocket. Then we'll be just fine. By the end of the week, the cabin was no longer just a home. It was a stronghold. The first warning came as silence. A rabbit snare Taryn had set was tripped but empty. The bait was gone. And beside it, footprints, heavy boots, multiple pairs. "How many?" she asked. Taryn didn't answer. He just stood and scanned the ridge. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the door, blade in hand. Naomi sat across the room, rifle on her lap. Near midnight, the wind shifted. Taryn met her eyes, nodded once, and slipped out the back. He returned minutes later and placed something in her palm. A strip of cloth, torn flannel, cheap, sweat-stained. "Scouting," he said. "Testing our distance. They'll be back." Naomi stared at the rag. "We hold," she said. Taryn nodded, but in her chest a storm was building, and when it broke, it would not pass quietly. They rose before the sun. The quiet in the valley had teeth. "They're coming," Taryn said, stringing his bow. "Not today, but soon." "They think you're just one man," Naomi said. Taryn finally looked up. His eyes were hard but alive. "They think they found a woman alone. What they found was a family." Ashki didn't know the details, but he helped. He filled water pails, carried firewood. He practiced walking like Taryn, weight low, eyes wide. He was ready to be brave. They set traps, between the rocks at the creek crossing, behind the barn. "If they step here," Taryn said, "they'll bleed." Naomi looked him straight in the eye. "Good. This would be violence chosen, not survived." She didn't flinch. The signs came at noon. A flicker of movement between the trees, a horse whining low. Naomi ducked behind the barn. Taryn lay flat on the ridge above, a panther in the grass. 4 men, one on horseback, Elias Crow. Naomi gripped her rifle. Her heart beat too loud. Taryn's arrow struck first. It hit a post beside one man's head. A warning. The man jumped back, cursing. Taryn rose from the ridge, tall and broad. "Turn around." Elias didn't move. "This land belongs to no one." Naomi stepped out from the barn, rifle aimed. "Wrong," Elias smirked. "2 people can't hold a valley." "We are not 2, Naomi said. "We're enough." One of the men reached for his pistol. Naomi fired. The shot hit the dirt near his feet. He stumbled back, wide-eyed. Another man shifted. His boot caught a wire. Snap! A heavy branch swung down, cracking across his back. He dropped, screaming. Naomi chambered another round. "No need to get trigger-happy, Blackbird," Crow said, raising his hands. Taryn moved closer. "Leave, while you still can." Crow stared at Naomi. His smile faded. "You think you've won today?" Naomi didn't blink. "I know I have." He mounted his horse. "You won't always be this lucky." She raised her rifle. "Try me again. We'll see." Elias rode off, his men limping behind him. Inside the cabin, Ashki ran to her, throwing his arms around her legs. "I heard yelling," he said, "but I didn't move." "You did perfect," she whispered into his hair. Taryn stepped into the doorway. "They'll be back," he said. Naomi looked at him. "We'll be ready." This was more than dirt, more than blood. This was home, and no one would take it from them. Retreat didn't mean surrender. It meant reload. Elias Crow sat by his campfire, nursing a bruised ego. "You let a woman and an Indian scare you off?" one of his men asked. Crow stared into the fire. "They got lucky." "No, boss. They got smart." Crow's jaw tightened. "Then we stopped being polite." He stood, tossing the rest of his whiskey into the flames. "At dawn, we go in full. Guns drawn. Fire to the roof. No more warnings." Naomi woke to the smell of smoke. Not from the hearth. From the trees. She ran to the window. A thin trail of black snaked through the forest. "They're coming." Taryn was already up. "Go wake Ashki. Tell him to hide." Ashki didn't panic. He slid into the crawl space beneath the floorboards, clutching his wooden bear. Naomi kissed his forehead. "Stay silent. No matter what you hear. Promise you won't leave me." "I swear it." She closed the hatch and loaded the rifle. The first gunshot cracked through the woods as the sun barely cleared the ridge. Naomi crouched behind the shed. 4 men advancing. Taryn moved through the trees like wind. An arrow hissed, burying itself in a man's thigh. He screamed and crumpled. Gunfire erupted. Naomi fired. A man ducked behind a fence post, clipped in the shoulder. A bullet whizzed past her ear and punched into the doorframe. Splinters flew. Taryn rolled from the brush, knife flashing. The man closest to the cabin fell hard. Only two left, and Crow was one of them. He stepped into view, long rifle drawn. "You could have just left," he shouted. "You could have sold." Naomi stood on the porch, boots planted. "I did leave once," she yelled back. "Never again. You're going to die for this patch of dirt." "No," she said. "I'm going to live for it." Crow raised his rifle, but a shotgun blast echoed like thunder before he could fire. Crow stumbled, bleeding from his side, his aim ruined. May Holloway stepped from the trees, her hair wild, her face calm. "You boys forget," she said. "This valley don't take kindly to thieves." Crow fell to his knees, groaning, and dropped his gun. The last man ran. Naomi rushed inside, throwing open the hatch. Ashki crawled out, wide-eyed but smiling. "You came back," he whispered. "Always," she said, hugging him so tight he squeaked. Taryn stood over Crow, panting, blood dripping from a cut above his brow. Crow looked up through gritted teeth. "You don't have the guts to kill me." Naomi stared down at him. "No," she said, "but I've got the guts to let you live and send word." Crow's eyes narrowed. "What word?" She crouched beside him. "This place belongs to us. And if anyone comes for it again," Taryn added, his voice low, "we won't leave warning shots. Next time, we aim for the heart." They buried the blood in the dirt and tended the wounds. "Did we win?" Ashki asked later, as he helped scrub gunpowder from the floorboards. Naomi looked to Taryn, who leaned against the doorframe. "We're still here," she said. He nodded. "That's winning." Later, when the stars came out, they sat outside, the three of them, quiet and whole. Ashki laid his head in Naomi's lap. Taryn held her hand. The wind rustled softly through the pines. "This land is ours," Naomi whispered. Taryn added, "And now it knows it." They didn't speak of what came next, but deep in Naomi's chest, for the first time in years, there was space to dream. The valley looked different now, not because of what had burned or bled, but because of what had stayed. The morning after the siege, dew clung to the tall grass like a final blessing. Ashki chased butterflies by the river. Naomi hung laundry on the line. Taryn sat on the porch, carving, the way only a man at peace could. There was no need to listen for hoofbeats anymore. Only stillness. Only home. May Holloway visited 3 days later, bringing honey biscuits. "You going to report it?" she asked. Naomi shook her head. "To who? The sheriff won't ride out here for anything short of a massacre." May nodded. "Then what happens next?" Naomi glanced toward the river where Ashki was skipping stones. "We rebuild. We plant. We teach him what this land really is." "And if Crow comes back?" Taryn, silent until now, looked up from his carving. "He won't." May raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "No," he said simply, "but I'm ready." May smiled. "I used to think you were wasting yourself out here," she told Naomi. "Punishing yourself. But now I see. You weren't hiding. You were planting. It took a storm to make it bloom." That night, Ashki asked over stew, "Was Papa always a warrior?" Naomi and Taryn exchanged a glance. "He was a warrior before you were born," she said, "but not just with a blade, with honor, with choices." "And some battles, son," Taryn added, "don't look like fights. They look like staying, protecting, loving, even when it's hard." Ashki thought about that. "Mama's a warrior too," he declared. Naomi smiled. "I just held the line." Taryn reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "That's the hardest fight of all." As the days grew longer, Ashki asked more questions. "Are we Apache?" Taryn answered softly. "You're more than one thing. You carry rivers and roots, fire and silence. You are the future of both worlds." A letter came by Ryder near the end of May. It was anonymous, but the handwriting was careful. "The Crow property has been sold. He left for California. Word is he won't be back. Some things fix themselves. Keep the land. Keep the boy. Keep the fire burning." Naomi folded the paper and placed it in a drawer with Ashki's birth certificate, an old photograph of her father, and the scrap of Taryn's leather wristband. Some things weren't just memories. They were proof. On the first warm night of summer, Taryn took Naomi's hand and led her to the edge of the river. Fireflies blinked in the reeds. The moon rose slow and golden. "I walked a long road to come back here," he said, "but I didn't come back for land." Naomi watched the moonlight ripple across the water. "I know," she said. "You came back for what we never got to finish." He nodded. "And what we haven't even begun." She leaned into him, and for the first time, neither of them looked back. In the end, it wasn't a story about war. It wasn't even a story about land. It was a story about choosing to stay, about building something fragile in a violent world, and guarding it not with walls, but with love. Because not all love begins with words. Some begins with a storm. And when it passes, the roots that remain are the strongest of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got another story coming your way that you won't want to miss. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought about Naomi's choice to stand her ground. Thanks for watching.